All right. Hello, everybody. We're just going to wait a few minutes
Yeah,
till we
we're
get
gonna let
started.
we'll let folks filter into the room.
Exactly.
In the meantime, if you're there watching, if you could maybe type your name and where you're joining us from in the chat, that would be awesome. We'd love to welcome you. See who we got in the room.
Hello, YouTube.
Hello, YouTube.
You can actually take some time to get something to drink because it's going to start in a moment.
That's right.
Absolutely. Get yourself something to drink. Do a few yoga stretches if that's your thing. It's not my thing, but
Does
I
no one
said
want to?
somewhere.
No one is introducing themselves. Come on, folks, speak up. Let us know you're there. Otherwise, you're going to force us to just talk about the conference and Medicare for all. We'd really love to just chat with you informally. Oh, Judy.
Nice.
Hi, Judy. Illinois.
Hi, Mark.
Awesome.
That does it. We got Maryland in the house. Jim McGee. Welcome, Chuck.
Chuck
From One Player
Pinocchio.
States in Pittsburgh.
Sandy Eaton. We've got Maureen.
One
We've
of our
got
mass care
David.
peoples. Yep.
New York City.
New York
Finally.
City in the house.
Bob in Boston, just down the street from me.
Bob Mason. Are we related?
Oregon. I miss Oregon. I remember last in-person conference in Portland. It was awesome.
Hi, Jasmine.
Jasmine. Ooh, we got John in Granby, Massachusetts. Chris in Spokane.
Linda and Wes in Oregon.
Oh, and we have Judy Lerma.
Hey, Judy.
Healthcare Now board member.
Mm-hmm.
Fellow Texan. Texas is really overrepresented in this.
Texas can't be overrepresented.
Yes.
All right, Charlie and Eugene. And we got Patricia in Sacramento.
Welcome, Paul from Indiana.
Beautiful Bothell. Healthcare for All Washington. Very nice. For those who are just joining us, we are just allowing folks to filter in the room and get connected. If you want to just introduce yourself in the comments. We're welcoming folks here. Hi there, Max in sunny San Diego. That is lovely. Ooh, and we've got Phil in Sacramento.
Oh, Heather. Hi, Heather. New Hampshire.
Yay.
All right. Should we get the show on the road? We have some people to thank, too, to start off with before we start. But why don't we introduce ourselves first?
Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Okay. Go through the formalities here. I'm Benjamin Day, Executive Director of Healthcare Now. I'm based in Boston, Mass.
And I'm Gillian. I am the Communications Director for Healthcare Now, and I am based in Corpus Christi, Texas.
And I am Sofia, and I'm with Equality Texas. I'm also based in San Antonio, Texas, and welcome, everyone.
Yes, and hi, Linda from Colorado, Bill from Ohio. Good to see everyone. And I want to start off just by thanking some folks without whom this conference could not happen. I want to start off with the organizations that have sponsored the conference: Physicians for a National Health Program, the Machinists Union, National Nurses United, whoop, whoop, the Labor Campaign for Single Payer, Minnesota Nurses, Healthcare for All Oregon, Public Citizen, Russ Ribicki of Share Power Responsible Investing, the Steelworkers, MassCare, Progressive Democrats of America, Massachusetts Peace Action, Democratic Socialists for Medicare for All, Healthcare for All Washington, and Railroad Workers United. You recognize a lot of our sort of best national ally groups fighting for Medicare for All on that list. And I also want to thank, all of the presenters and speakers for this conference. All do it, for free out of their love for Medicare for All and wanting to spread the word and share kind of what they've been working on. So thank you so much to all the volunteer workshop presenters and speakers and all the folks who recorded those plenaries. And last but not least, we have a tech support team who's helping everyone who's having any issues, connecting to the conference. That's Kale and Holly, and they're in a separate Zoom room right now, helping people who might have any issues. And finally, I want to thank our Healthcare Now board, who are our benevolent bosses and overlords. Thank you. As you can tell, Sofia is kind of our guest joining us for this opening plenary. And we wanted to talk a little bit on this plenary about why we decided to focus this year's conference on racial equity and applying a racial equity lens to Medicare for All. So, Sofia, welcome. Thank you for joining us as always. Can you kind of just introduce yourself a little bit and a little bit more than you did just, name and location, and tell us a bit about yourselves and why you think it's so important that we sort of center racial equity in our work for Medicare for All.
Thank you, Ben, and definitely, my name is again. Thank you, everybody, and welcome everyone, and thank you for being here and a Saturday and enjoying your Medicare for All conference. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Sofia Sepulveda. I'm a long-time Medicare for All organizer. I am also the community engagement and advocacy manager with Ecology Texas, and I'm part of the board of Healthcare Now. And why did we decide to touch on racial equity during this Medicare for All conference? Well, to start off, we are at a crossroads at this moment. When southern states are trying to push legislation that ban Black history, when there are insurance that talks about enslaved people are being changed to migrant workers, when the police continue brutalizing our Black communities, when people like the Buffalo shooter targets Black people, when El Paso shooting wants to get rid of undocumented people, we must speak through the lens of racial equity. We saw the disparities coming to light during the COVID pandemic, which we still are in the middle of the pandemic, by the way.
Yep.
The disparities, not only, yeah, exactly. So thank you for doing it on Zoom. Ben, we saw the disparities coming to light during the COVID pandemic, which we are still in the middle of it. The disparities not only between the have and have-nots, but between the white and the Black and brown communities. We saw our community struggle with COVID while testing sites were in white populated areas with very little pandemic outburst. We saw the vaccine being distributed in those areas, all the while our people were struggling to get there, riding a bus that would make it not just harder to travel, sometimes waiting hours to get to the destination, but getting exposed to the virus while trying to get the vaccine. Our communities are struggling in San Antonio alone. There is no hospital in Black and brown neighborhoods, but they are all confined in white areas. We have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the Western nations, and most of those affected are Black women. A lot of the people in the gig economy are day laborers. In the service industry are Black or Latina. We were heroes at the beginning of the pandemic until white folks wanted to leave their house to dine and wine, and then we were no longer heroes. We were disposable. So that's why we're touching on racial equity. And don't forget to go to your racial inequity workshop today at 1:45 and then at 3:15 if you haven't signed up for it. Please sign up for it today.
Yes.
Awesome. And that is, of course, being led by the incomparable Stephanie Nakajima. Thank you so much, Sofia, for setting that context for us. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the underlying issues here. So, so many of these racial disparities that we see today can be traced back to a common argument for American conservatives for over 200 years, and that is states' rights. Since the 19th century, states' rights has been a banner for racists to hide behind, an excuse for why we can't make true national progress. And in healthcare, we've seen all the way back to the first universal healthcare system proposed in this country by President Truman in the 1940s, that states' rights has become a way to justify a patchwork system where Southern states in particular could continue to perpetuate a reign of healthcare apartheid. And I want to show a quick video actually made by Stephanie Nakajima for Healthcare Now that sort of delves very quickly into that history.
Among high-income countries, universal health care is standard, except here in the United States. Why is that? Here's a reason that you may have never heard before. Our failure to pass a national health plan is largely due to America's history of structural racism. In 1945, Democrats were in control of the House, Senate, and the executive. and President Harry Truman decided to push for national health care. That year, 64% of Americans supported a national health insurance plan. Support in the states' rights South, which was heavily Democratic at the time, was even higher than the national average. Seem too good to be true? That's because Truman's proposal would have expanded health coverage through Social Security, which at the time explicitly excluded agricultural and domestic workers. That meant 60% of Black men and 80% of Black women were not eligible for the benefit. However, the push for national health care coincided at a time when challenges to Jim Crow and discriminatory provisions in federal programs like Social Security were also underway. In 1946, Truman established a Civil Rights Committee, which desegregated the military and banned discriminatory hiring practices in the federal government. Southern elites began to link new proposals coming out of Washington with threats to segregation in education, healthcare, and housing. The possibility that a national health plan would desegregate the healthcare system and institute a significant transfer of wealth from whites to blacks caused Southern support to plummet from 66% in 1945 to only 22% 4 years later. Southern elites were a core constituent of the Democratic Party at the time, and nothing could be passed without them. In 1949, around the time every other wealthy country was moving towards universal health care, the Democratic coalition fractured and Truman's plan in Congress died. In 1964, the NAACP won a landmark Supreme Court case requiring hospitals built with federal funds, which was most of them, to desegregate. A few months later, the Civil Rights Act was passed, reinforcing this mandate. Passage of a true national health plan was still blocked by Southern Democrats in the 60s, since after the Civil Rights Act, this would have meant desegregating the entire healthcare system. So in 1965, the Southern delegation finally came to the table to negotiate the creation of two groundbreaking, yet limited healthcare programs: Medicare, which initially covered only seniors, and Medicaid, a state-run program for certain groups of low-income people. The Dixiecrats ensured that these programs were designed as much as possible around the racial hierarchies in the healthcare system. For example, Medicare is split into two parts. Part A, the part that covers hospital care, requires no premium. Medicare Part B, the part that covers physician care outside of a hospital, does require a premium. Why split Medicare into two parts? Part B was designed this way so that physicians' offices in the South could claim that it was a voluntary insurance program, not a direct government payment, and continued to racially segregate their offices and refuse Black patients. And why was Medicaid created as a federally funded but state-administered plan, while Medicare was administered by the federal government? This compromise allowed Southern states to discriminate against low-income people of color in terms of eligibility as well as benefit levels, and this also dramatically slowed the desegregation of nursing homes. While Jim Crow laws no longer exist, the impact of structural racism on our country's healthcare system has been profound. People of color are still overrepresented in states that have poor safety nets and strict Medicaid eligibility requirements, and new waves of immigrants, particularly Latinx, have fallen into these systems of racial inequity created for African Americans. True national health care, like Medicare for All, was blocked by segregationists during the post-war period when the rest of the developed world was establishing health care as a right. By the 1970s and 80s, a large healthcare industry and lobby had emerged, making passage of national health care more difficult and likely requiring a massive social movement. It's time to atone for this ugly chapter in our history by building that movement and guaranteeing everyone health care from cradle to grave.
Thank you so much. As Stephanie says, right, the legacy of the racism that built our healthcare system is still with us today. As we're watching Republican governors, many of them in former Confederate states, to refuse Medicaid expansion and imposing increasingly draconian limits on gender-affirming healthcare and reproductive care, all policies that disproportionately impact communities of color. And that's one of the reasons that Medicare for All, more than ever, is a critical intervention that would function as a corrective to the patchwork system and establish a national standard of care. And if you're interested in these issues, I really want to encourage you to check out the Patients Over Profits, take the corporate healthcare industry head-on workshop with NNU. And that's going to deal with the nurses' strategy to organize the South this year. We're really excited about it. And then I also, while states' rights and the patchwork system has been a problem, there are folks here who are sort of flipping that on its head. And so there are people who are exploiting that states' rights loophole to win single payer in their own states as part of the effort to bring the whole country closer to Medicare for all. And they're going to be featured in the State of the States panel. So we definitely want to check that out.
Yep, I'm really looking forward to the workshops today, and thanks everyone also for your comments in the comment section. We'll loop you back in a little bit later. Some folks have some questions we can answer. But Sofia, I wanted to ask you, why do you think it's especially important that we integrate racial equity lens and talking about racial equity in our sort of movement for Medicare for all, beyond just why racism is part of our history of our healthcare system here?
Well, that is a very great question and very loaded question. So we've seen actually in the past, right? We've seen actually in the past when movements are majority led by white folk, they are destined to leave communities of color behind. We saw it during the suffragette movement. We saw it during the golden era of the United States, right? Mm-hmm. So they stop the movement at the moment that they get what they need and forget the work that we and communities of colors have put within the movement. Their lives are comfortable, so there is no reason to continue being uncomfortable. However, eventually, and because the fight did not reach the most vulnerable, it creeps up again. In the road to social and economic justice, we must center the communities that have been and continue to be systemically disenfranchised. So we need to be organizing with purpose and accountability, particularly when we are trying to engage communities we are going to impact. This doesn't mean you don't have a place in the movement, white folks. Well, our work is to agitate and bring our communities together. Your job as white allies is educating your white folks, your fellow peers, not just about Medicare for all, but about the systemic racism, the systemic oppression our communities have been living under and still are living under. What happens to the trauma our communities face when we learn that another Black man or a trans woman has been killed by the hands of the police officer, which is happening quite often, is devastating, especially to our mental health. Understanding that there will be no class war without addressing the systemic racism our people have been exposed to through generations is pivotal when winning this fight, realizing that if we uplift Black, brown, queer, trans communities by default, white communities will benefit too. And by allowing our people to be leaders in the movement will then attract more people into the fold, then we will have a path to making Medicare for all a reality. As we know, racism is what has and still keeping us from achieving Medicare for all. And not just Medicare for all, though, but Medicaid expansion, better education. Like right now, they're trying to divide school dividing school districts, right? District A gets more money than District B because District A has a lot of homeowners, and most of them are white folk. Student loans right now with the 5 student loans, making housing affordable, better jobs, pensions, you name it. It all had been eroded away because of racism. Most of these benefits, immigrants don't even have access to.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Sofia, about the important role of white people talking about racism in their own communities with other white people, I think this is especially important, and you learn this almost immediately if you start doing organizing work around Medicare for all. I've done a lot of signature gathering and door knocking and crowd canvassing for Medicare for all over the last 20 years or so. And I can tell you the number one pushback that I get, even here in liberal Massachusetts, is, will this cover illegal immigrants? That's the phrase you hear more often than any other type of resistance and opposition to Medicare for all from folks. And that's not just my personal experience. I think that's pretty much everyone I've talked to here who does canvassing and talking to people we don't know about Medicare for all. And I mean, just think about that for a moment. Many white people worry more about paying for a group of other people who they see as racial others than they worry about what the impact of Medicare for All might be on their own life. That is how powerful and I think deeply ingrained racial fears are in white America. So we have to talk about race, particularly when we're organizing in white communities. And I think we have to be able to speak about racism in the language that is like recognizable to people who are not progressives. So you can't just use kind of, left lingo that you might be comfortable with. Because, Medicare for All, it's really about kind of creating a healthcare system of solidarity where we all look out for each other. We care for one another when we most need it. And the truth is that racial fears are kind of, I think, at the core of many white people's opposition to universal programs. So this is, I think, particularly important when you look at the map of the United States, because the districts where we need to focus our attention right now, where there are Democrats who are not supporting Medicare for All, these communities are more white, they're less woke, so to speak, than the communities where we've had success organizing so far. They are more suburban, they're more exurban, and they're more rural than the ones where we've had a lot of organizing success so far. So transitioning, we want to talk about a couple of other really important things that we're focusing on this conference because we think they're important for the next year or two of organizing in the Medicare for All movement. Right now, we have a divided Congress, obviously. Republicans control the House. So you might think that, we're not going to get anything done for the next 2 years, but tell that to the right, because they are aggressively going after abortion access, gun regulations, transgender health, civil rights, even the right to vote in basically every state they control. So they are not waiting for a Congress that they can control to start changing the entire political landscape and economic landscape and social landscape. So, and I, along those lines, I want to pitch, obviously, my favorite person's workshop. Gillian is doing a workshop on reproductive health, reproductive justice, and the Medicare for All movement. So make sure to go to that one. So we have this other theme, which is becoming really important this year, which is kind of protecting and expanding our existing public healthcare programs. We're talking about Medicare, Medicaid, the Veterans Administration, Indian Health Services. There were already some incredible plenaries this week about real organizing success that the Medicare for All movement has had, starting to chip away at political support for Medicare Advantage and the privatization of Medicare. And I think this is not just incremental organizing. This lets us begin to undermine the political power of private insurance companies and to start making them politically toxic for legislators, which they are not currently, not even Democrats. Democrats happily sign on to, have in the past been happily signing on to go ahead, privatize Medicare. We love these, for-profit Medicare plans. But we are starting to change that for the first time, I think, in many, many years, which is so important. So, we're talking about here the ACO REACH, and I want to shout out our allies at Physicians for a National Health Program who have been leading the fight on a lot of this. And again, this campaign against Medicare Advantage and privatizing Medicare, which I think we're going to pass this tipping point where more than half of Medicare recipients are going to be on Medicare Advantage soon. And to link this back up with the racial equity theme, Medicare Advantage disproportionately covers people of color because often they are more affordable plans, but they are shittier plans that fail you when you actually need to access healthcare. So we are now creating this second tier of coverage under Medicare, which is supposed to be a universal program that benefits everyone equally. So Sofia, could you talk a little bit about Medicaid? Because I think in the Medicare for All movement, we tend to see attacks on Medicare as like really relevant to our work, but often people overlook Medicaid, which I think is another problem having to do with racial equity. So being based in Texas, can you tell us a little bit about why we need to fight for, Medicaid expansion and also resist the privatization of Medicaid program?
Thank you, Ben, for that question. And yes, I kind of like you, I get really flustered when people is like, we should leave Medicare expansion alone and we should focus just on Medicare for All. And it's like, right now, there is no chances in the Congress to pass Medicare for All. So we need to start putting some sort of help for our communities. And the little bit of help of Medicare expansion will alleviate a lot of people. Like starting to begin with, a whopping number of 3.7 million people will benefit from Medicare expansion if we were to spend Medicaid on the 11 remaining states that have not done it yet. In Texas alone, though, over 1.5 million Texans, most of them Black and Latine, immigrant folks still cannot access the Affordable Care Act benefits, y'all, just in case you did forget about that. But they will with Medicare for All, will benefit from this expansion. They will qualify for Medicaid and get lower premiums through the Affordable Care Act. Again, this is not the cure, but it's a roadmap to gaining better medical care and alleviating the burden many communities of color face when accessing care right now. So which of these states have not expanded Medicaid yet? Well, these are the same states that are banning critical race theory, Black and Indigenous history. They're pushing to privatize school. They're taking away workers' rights. They're making it difficult to vote, making it legal to discriminate against trans people. And instead of expanding Medicaid, they're pushing to take away health care from the trans community, in particular, people of color. So basically, it is racism that is preventing the states from passing Medicare expansion. Texas, Florida, Alabama, Wyoming, Kansas, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. Sounds like a song, but it's not. And yes, you guessed right. Most of these states have a Republican governor, with the exception of Wisconsin, which Republicans do have a supermajority, veto-proof Senate. So why is it racism that is preventing from passing this law? First, it was passed during the president of the first Black man ever elected to that office, Barack Obama.
Mhm.
Even though the whole legislation was crafted by the Heritage Foundation and pushed through first with Mitt Romney while governor of Massachusetts. Everyone remember Romneycare? And this is literally a Republican dream, giving money and power to private insurance companies and insurance that they get bigger. But what is the caveat? Why they don't want to pass it? It's because most of the time it will benefit Black and brown folks. So fighting for Medicare expansion while pushing for Medicare for all is not only logical, but necessary to ensure equity in an otherwise unequal system that is working precisely the way it was meant to work, to leave people of color out. But Medicare for all, yeah, you might be asking, is for all of us, right? Well, it is until it isn't. And so to make it possible, we must dismantle racism, because for people who enjoy privilege their entire life, equity might sound like a demotion.
Sorry, I got some chills there. Sophia, thank you. That was really, really brilliant. I also wanted to mention the Veterans Administration. The VA, like Medicare and Medicaid, is one of the few models of public health care that we have in this country. And it successfully delivers care to millions of veterans throughout the country. But much like Medicare and Medicaid, the VA is under constant attacks by privatizers and also folks who are looking to defund this system that is so critical to folks who our country has sent off to war. And so I want to make sure to pitch the workshop that's happening on the VA with Suzanne Gordon and some other folks. And basically that workshop is called How the VA Created a System of Trauma-Informed Care and How It Serves as a Model to Help Fix Our Broken Healthcare non-system. And that workshop is going to talk about the importance of understanding the VA as our only public health system that has actually been built to deal with trauma, which is so critical as we realize now just how much trauma has impacted all of our health. And so they're going to be talking a little bit more about how this can function as a model for Medicare for all, and how we can preserve that system and learn from it. So with that, this is just a taste of some of the amazing things that we have available this weekend in terms of workshops, some of the amazing folks who are going to be here. And so I just want to give you a little reminder that we can't do it all alone. Sophia, you want to tell folks how they can help us?
And we cannot do it alone, and we cannot do it without money, right? So we need money. This is a grassroots nonprofit organization, so we need as much help as you can give us, whether it's $5 to $50 to $100. Please donate to us. Please tell your friends, right? The people who you are talking and organizing with. Organizing is not an easy job. Organizing, especially leading a huge event like we're leading today, is not an easy job, and it's very expensive. So in order to continue educate our communities, in order to continue making strides to in the road of gaining Medicare for all, we need to get funded. And again, because a lot of organizations have very much white led, they don't fund Medicare for all work. So we need you. We need you to ask your friends. We need to ask your family. We need you to help us with a monthly donation, make it monthly. So I don't know if we can put there it is, healthcare dash now, donate healthcare now. Please let your friends know. Please let us know if you have any questions. We need as much help as necessary. I'm a monthly donor for healthcare now. So be yourself a monthly donor. $5, $10, that goes a lot, especially if we want to have an in-person conference next year. We're gonna need money, y'all. We're gonna need money. So you better start like opening your wallets as you open your hearts, as you open your minds, open those wallets and help us out.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention also that we anyone who requests to waive the registration fee, we automatically approve it. So we gave out, I think, more than 60 scholarships this year. And that means we have to raise over $2,000 just to cover those scholarships. And we haven't done that yet. So if you can make a donation, even to just help the folks who would have a hard time affording accessing this conference, if they didn't have that scholarship option, that would make a big difference. So thanks.
Mm-hmm. And your donations, of course, help not only to make this conference accessible to the people who are most impacted by healthcare injustice, but also to make the rest of our programs accessible. All of the trainings and workshops and events that we have over the course of the year that are open, again, to folks who are really disproportionately impacted by this healthcare crisis. Thank you so much.
And a little bit before we move, Mark did mention something super important. Let's plug in the conference sessions that have happened throughout the week. Go ahead and watch them. They're really amazing. They're really good. Kind of like I've been watching it live. But if you cannot watch them live stream it after, right? They're really good. So go ahead and make sure that you check out those sessions.
Yeah,
absolutely.
People may not realize it, but all the sessions from previously in the week are still there. When you go to the conference website, it kind of shrinks it down. So you have to click on, Monday, April 17th, and it'll open up and show you all the sessions there. Or you click on Tuesday, April 18th, it'll show you all the sessions there. And you can still go back and watch all those if you missed them. Gillian, do you want to talk a little bit about conference norms and we can talk about techie stuff just to guide folks through the rest of the conference?
Yeah, sounds good. Or bad, depending on your your thoughts about technology right now. But first, let's talk a little bit about conference norms. These are just some of the kind of basic standards that we hold ourselves to when we get together in a group. The first one is that respect is the fundamental principle of everything we do. Always, this is important, but especially when we're online. Let's all be honest. When we get behind a computer screen and a keyboard, we have a tendency to get bolder and maybe a little more critical and a little meaner. So try to bring to this your best self and not necessarily the snarky bitches we all are on Reddit or Twitter 364 days of the year. Again, also just the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. And that means that this is going to be a long struggle. So you should treat the folks that you meet this weekend as people who you're going to be standing alongside in struggle for quite some time. Number 2, speak from your own experience. Don't generalize, and respect other people when they talk from their own experience. If you find yourself saying a lot about something you haven't experienced, and there are folks in the room who have, you might want to stop talking. Number 3, attack the problem, not the person. No personal attacks. It's just not polite. Step up, step back. If you're the kind of person who does a lot of talking, like for example, myself, right? You want to step back and make room for other people to talk. And if you're the kind of person who's maybe a little bit shy about talking in public, challenge yourself to step up and tell your truth because we need to hear it. Number 5, understand the difference between intent and impact, right? Think about how the stuff you're going to say will impact other people, ideally before you say it. And accept the fact that even if you don't mean to, you probably will say things that hurt or offend others. And the fact that you didn't mean to do it doesn't mean that it doesn't sting. So say you're sorry and do better in the future. And then I want to suggest consider a call in before a call out. You may have heard these terms before, but given that we're in this together for the long haul, you might think about whether it's more appropriate to sort of call someone in gently, maybe even privately, rather than calling them out more harshly in public. That being said, sometimes the situation is so egregious that you have to react, and sometimes something has to be said in public. Use your judgment. One area where we ask you one area that is completely non-negotiable is just that we want you to respect people's personal pronouns. In terms of the kind of tech etiquette of everything, keep yourself on mute if you aren't speaking. Type stack in the chat or raise your hand on Zoom if you want to speak. Stack, for those who are not familiar, is basically shorthand for put me in the stack of people who want to talk. And if you raise your hand to speak, make sure to unraise it when you're done talking. Use the chat, but try not to distract from what's going on screen. If you want to have a side conversation, you can chat someone directly. If something goes wrong and the session ends suddenly, try reconnecting in a few minutes. If something goes wrong and your facilitator loses their connection to your session, please wait a few minutes for them to return. And try to keep your camera on if you can, because it's nice to see your beautiful faces, but understand that some people can't, whether it's for privacy or conserving bandwidth, right? Some people might not be able to turn their cameras on, but if you can do it, it makes us all feel more like we're all together. And also, if your pet is in the room with you while your camera is on, it is required that they make an on-camera appearance, especially if your pet is really cute.
Also non-negotiable. You must share your pet.
Absolutely. And then my final unofficial suggestion is just to wear pants, because you just never know.
All right. So we're going to wrap this up. Oh, little floorball. Fluffy. Adorable. So I just want to end this also by saying, if to help you out with tech issues, if you have any issues navigating the conference, we have an attendee guide, and I'm going to put up on the screen right now the link to the attendee guide. It's bit.ly/M4A23 guide, and probably 99.9% of the problems you might run into are answered in the guide. So if you're tech challenged, I would really encourage you to, even if you're not, just browse through that, and it's going to go over, hopefully you know how to register for sessions and attend them because you're here, but it'll also help you how to set up your conference profile, how to install the mobile app if you want to. It has a whole list of frequently asked questions. But if all of that fails you and you really get stuck, we have the conference email, which is conference@healthcare-now.org. We have a tech support team that is going to answer questions really, really quickly. And we also have a live Zoom tech support room. So if you go to the conference website right at the very top in the description where it says, this year's conference is about blah, 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 right underneath that, it says a live Zoom room, and you click here and you can click there and it'll take you right into a Zoom room where our tech support team, Kale and Holly, will help you out and will stick with you until your problems are solved. So. All right. I think that's it. We have next up on the agenda, nothing. We ask you to just take a nice break. We don't like to string together too much stuff, but starting at 2:45 p.m.
Before we go, if we can...
Yeah,
go ahead, Sofia, go ahead.
If we can mention that question about the indigenous healthcare system, are indigenous people included on Medicare for All? Yes, they are included on Medicare for All. We saw what happened during COVID with A lot of our indigenous tribes were suffering so much during COVID because they didn't have access to the vaccination. They didn't have access to any types of treatment. So they are definitely included in Medicare for all. And we need to make that loud and clear.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks. And great question, Bill. I think we need to be doing more work connecting with Indigenous communities in the Medicare for All movement as well. So you have a break coming up next on the agenda, but then starting at 2:45 p.m. Eastern, there's 2 blocks of workshops in a row. So choose the workshop you want, make sure to check them off, add them to your schedule. And I hope you really enjoy. And then we'll pick this all up again tomorrow on Sunday, starts immediately with workshops. And then we have a Gather, which is like a social networking site where you can walk around as a little cartoon character, meet with people, talk to them sort of informally like you would at a real conference, just walking around, talking to people you run into. And then finally, we'll have a closing plenary where we're going to focus on campaigns that are active right now in the Medicare for All movement that you can jump into and get involved with right away. So thank you so much, everyone, and look forward to running into you all in the workshops and on Gather and talking to you in the closing plenary. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
y'all.